Blog Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is THORGECKO, Late Night Leos. I'm here with Desert Snow Gecko, and we have Kline from Luxurious Leopards and the Kill Crypto Project, and Dr. Mike Weniger. So why don't you guys just jump right into it and tell us all about crypto and who gave birth to it and where it's at now.
Okay, so it started this whole project started a long time ago, about, 2.5-ish years, and it started out with Pat and I sitting in surgery at somewhere between 4 and 6 in the morning. I forget exactly what we were doing, but we both worked together at an emergency clinic, and he was doing anesthesia, and as we were closing up for surgery, we got to talking about what topics were important in reptile medicine, and because it's a huge interest of both of ours. And we got to thinking that, cryptosporidiosis is a huge problem, and there's really no effective treatment. So we got talking, and there was, at that point, relatively recently, a study showing that Pinworms worked for coccidia in some bearded dragons and other reptiles, and so we thought, well, maybe if Pinworms worked for them, it wouldn't be a huge stretch to try it for crypto. So we got to throwing some ideas around, and a project was born. So I guess I'll let Pat talk a little bit about what we started out doing and where it went from there.
Yeah, I think the crypto as a whole in the reptile hobby and reptile medicine whole is extremely important. It's kind of that skeleton in the closet that nobody ever wants to talk about. It's really important, and you talk to other breeders or maybe hobbyists, and you kind of feel bad about talking to it in the past. It's that hush thing, and any kind of clinical sign that you might see with a leopard gecko, as broad or as specific as it may be, everybody always goes, "Oh my God, I must have crypto in my collection." So that was really, for me, being a leopard gecko breeder for many years, the whole crypto topic was obviously something that I always wanted to work on. And working with Mike, who's an excellent exotics vet, and putting everything together, that's how this project was really born, and over a lot of coffee and a lot of surgeries at the exotic emergency clinic we did work at. So from there, it came to a topic of, well, where do we host this? Where do we go about it? There's a lot of different steps before anything research-wise actually gets off the ground. You need different committees to make sure the animals are obviously being trained or treated humanely, enough funding to do the research properly, and, of course, a method that's going to make sense and give you results that are actually going to be worthwhile and going to be accepted by not only the hobbyist reptile industry, but also by the peer-reviewed publishing journal. So there's a lot of steps there to go through, and that's why something like this is not a 2-month or a 3-month ordeal. It is years. So there's a lot of hurdles. So that brings me to the one point we wanted to bring up funding-wise and hosting. It was hosted at the Lehigh Valley Zoo. It is an AZA zoo located in Schnecksville, Pennsylvania, which is near Allentown, Pennsylvania, a large city here in Pennsylvania. And they were the hosting site for us. They were able to give some funding and also the spots to house it and materials. Myself and the staff, including Dr. Weniger, Dr. Stephen Marks, and a couple other certified techs on the team, worked on this project, and everything was donated by us as far as time and commitment to the project. So they're right there, took a decent amount of chunk out of the funding that was needed. Now, most of these projects require thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So here we have a great idea. We have people who are committed to running through with the idea and making it work, but we still don't have money and funding. So that's where, I'm really proud to say that the reptile community, the leopard gecko community came together and really, was a big part of making this work. We were able to get many donations from the community. We were able to hold many different auctions throughout the time we were holding it, which was a major part of the funding that allowed this to happen. There's a lot of things that money needs to go through. I mean, not just the animals. You're talking about the drugs, which are not cheap. You're talking about the equipment. And on top of that, you have to do testing, which is actually going to hold up and give you good results. And part of that is PCR, which is polymerase chain reaction, which is a really good test to see if the animal does or does not have crypto, checking for the DNA in the fecal samples. And those tests obviously aren't the cheapest in the world. And then on top of that, every animal who passed away or was euthanized humanely was given a histopath, which is an examination of the tissues microscopically after they passed away or you were euthanized, so that we can, again, confirm, deny, or see if the drug did work or if it affected any of the other organ systems in the leopard gecko. Because obviously if we treated crypto and we made the kidneys fail or liver fail, then we didn't really get that far. So the funding was just hugely based upon the community. So then basically the funding was flown through the auctions to a special fund that was housed and created and then directed funds from the zoo. There was never one individual who had control of it, which was nice. Everything had to be approved and have a place. So I know there's a lot of questions on monies. What does it cost to do something like this? Where were things allocated? And I want to touch upon that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So is there still a place to donate to the crypto fund, or are you guys, where is that now with the whole money thing?
The monies that were done, basically in whole, there was somewhere between $9,300 to $9,600 that were raised between monetary donations, and make this clear, we had donations from around the world. This was not just a United States thing. We had individuals just giving monetary donations from Europe and Asia that just gave some money to help out. Now, as far as further funding, to make it even more clear, this study was made to be a pilot study. And what that means is it's an excellent idea, but we are not the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Illinois. We don't have millions of dollars at our disposal with, big, expensive electron, microscopes. So this is meant to continue. The information we gathered was extremely valuable. And there's certainly more doors and avenues to be explored. So at this time, we don't really suggest sending in any more money, as much as it's always appreciated. The studies in the publishing part, which I'm going to turn that over a little bit later in the program to Dr. Wenninger to explain a little bit more of what's happening there. So at this point, we don't see any more auctions occurring, and as much as we do appreciate the support, we don't need it at this moment. The meat and potatoes of the project, as far as the physical work minus the paper, has been completed.
Okay.
Well, I just got to say that I loved your auctions. You had so many really awesome breeders donate animals and certificates to raising the funds, and I'll admit I think I may have bought twice when you've done those, and I think that they were great, and whoever organized those did an excellent job, and I really thought it was super fun. Not only were you raising money for your good cause, but I got some awesome animals out of that too. So thank you.
It was a good time. It was a really great time, and it was a lot of work. And there was dozens of donors out there, which I appreciate everybody who partake, whether purchasing, bidding, or donating, of course. There's a lot of great stuff up there, and people really seem to have a lot of fun with it.
I wanted to just get really quick. Not everyone out there listening may be incredibly familiar with crypto, since, as you had said, it is that hush-hush, it's the skeleton in the closet, that if you have it, you don't ever let anybody know that you had it kind of a situation. So could you just quickly describe for us what is crypto, what are some of the symptoms? And one of our listeners in the chat room on the Blog Talk Radio was wondering, Where did crypto come from? How was it discovered? And more information about, like, patient zero, so to speak.
I can talk a little bit about crypto. Sure. So in general, it's a single-celled apicomplexan, so it's a single-celled protozoan parasite. It's spread through fecal to oral contamination from an infected animal. And there's lots of different kinds of crypto affecting all classes of vertebrates. There's kinds in people, there's kinds in, livestock, dogs, cats, reptiles, birds, even amphibians and fish all have their own strains of crypto. And some of the medications actually being used in people have been shown to be somewhat toxic for use in reptiles, and so that's one of the problems that is sometimes encountered when trying to kind of change from one species to another is, how sensitive to the actual drug these patients are. But so cryptosporidium in our reptile patients tends to be in lizards more of a more of an intestinal problem where like small intestine becomes inflamed and it causes symptoms like mucoid bloody diarrhea, anorexia, vomiting, or regurgitation, I should say, and just like extreme weight loss, fading, and eventually death. And in our snake patients, it causes more like gastric hypertrophy, so the stomach gets thickened, it causes regurgitation, and oftentimes a little bit slower, but still causes emaciation and eventually death in those guys too. So it's essentially a parasite that's contagious. It's relatively prevalent. If I had to guess, I would say between, I would say a lot of and I don't want to make anyone mad here, but I would say a lot of the commercial breeders do have crypto in their collections, so it's a good idea. I think Pat's going to talk about screening for it, and I think that's a great idea. But I would say that probably between 5 and 10% of geckos that I check for it come up positive, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you think about the numbers of geckos that are bought and sold and traded, that ends up to expose a whole lot of them.
And so is this something that kills very quickly, or is it slow and painful? What have you seen?
That depends on kind of the age of the gecko and its kind of immune status and how well it's cared for. So a really young gecko with crypto, it progresses very, very quickly. They don't have a whole lot of reserves, and oftentimes, there can be other problems like stress from being housed in huge groups and things like that can kind of maybe worsen it a little bit, but it also tends to make it spread around and kind of like a kid in kindergarten with the flu. But and with the weakened immune system, do you notice that it's maybe not necessarily the parasite that kills the animal, but maybe a secondary infection? I think it's a combination, but most of these guys are just severely emaciated by the time that we see them. Sometimes we see even like prolapses and things like that just because of the inflammation caused by it. As you get more like adult animals that are exposed, they can carry it for a long time without showing symptoms, and so you can end up having, a gecko that appears healthy that's shedding crypto and infecting others. And if you have absolutely perfect husbandry and you're caring for them really well, and the kind of effects of it might not be as bad as if your husbandry is not spot on, like with your temperatures and things like that.
And so what are some other things, Dr. Wenneger, that could be mistaken for crypto? Because I'm sure there's other things, because we have this broad term, pencil tail, that refers to pretty much any animal that's emaciated, and it's like there's a zillion reasons of what causes this pencil tail, but I'm sure there are other things that can look like crypto as well.
Yeah, you're right. I have a lot of people that come in and it'll say in our appointment scheduler what they're coming in for, and it'll say, leopard gecko has pencil tail. And, crypto, because of its high prevalence, is one of the things we worry about most, but there are some viral diseases. There's enteritis because of some pathogenic bacteria. Just poor husbandry and stress can sometimes cause them to be like chronic poor doers, and they can slowly waste away. I've had geckos come in where people were, and this isn't going to be with like, breeders and things, but where an individual person is picked up a couple geckos for their family, and they're losing weight, and everybody's like, well, they got to have something bad, and they find out that the kid wasn't feeding them. So there's a huge there's a whole bunch of different pathogenesis that could cause it or cause pencil tail, but I think crypto is probably the most prevalent, so it's the one that most people worry about.
Well, another thing that I think that a lot of people might get up in arms about specifically would be pinworms, because it's also another like intestinal type parasite, and when you're talking about little parasites, a lot of people just clump them all together.
Yeah. We see pinworm a lot, and actually in a lot of our herbivorous species, we think more about, maybe the pinworms in small numbers are a little more like commensals rather than, causing a huge deal of pathology. I think in geckos, they shouldn't have pinworms, but I don't think that small burdens of them are going to be causing as much problem as what sometimes people think.
Well, I do really appreciate you explaining all that, because in our chat room we specifically have a few guests that had actually not known what crypto was. So having a good understanding of what it is definitely can help people keep an eye out for it in their own collections. And so, you guys have submitted your paper for publishing at this point, right? And you were talking about how it does take a little bit of time for that to happen. How long are we in this process at this time?
So I submitted the first draft of the paper back in, I think, early summer, and it took 3 months before I got any kind of, review, I guess, report back or critiques done. And with that, they suggested some revisions as far as discussing more of one area of the study and, maybe not discussing as much in another area and things like that. But they also wanted explanations on how we chose our dosing and our dosing regimen, and also, one of the critiques was that we couldn't say that we infected each gecko with 100 oocysts, which are cryptoorganisms. And we couldn't say that. We had to just test them or infect them and then test until they showed up positive and then continue monitoring them until they showed symptoms, because that would be kind of more like what you see in a clinical setting. They don't come in knowing that they got 100 oocysts. But for a study perspective, that means that some of the geckos might have been given 100 and some of them might have been given 1,000, and we don't have a way of knowing, because in order to know, you would need to have an electron microscope and you'd need to be able to count oocysts, which obviously costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time that we didn't have. So that was one of the big critiques. A couple of the other ones were about what our how we selected dosing and frequency, and just there were some suggestions and some things that we need to work through. So I believe I'm on the third revision now, and I've answered all of those questions, and we're going to be resubmitting and hopefully get an answer soon. I think it's important for this to get out there, and in one way, or shape, or form, it will get published. It's just, finding the appropriate venue to do so.
I think that this is just a really amazing opportunity to have you on the show and to explain, because I don't think that a lot of people put a lot of thought into exactly what goes into clinical studies or these kind of research studies, or actually like the drugs and then the publishing. So by you explaining this, it's really giving people a chance to open their eyes to this monumentous task that you guys have taken. I mean, you're on your third revision, and these are not little tiny, 1,000-word papers. These are huge, like a novel almost, right?
Yeah, I mean, ours, it's not 100 pages or anything, but, we have, our study consisted of 19 geckos. We have data points on, all of their PCR testing, which was done every 2 weeks for each gecko. And then we have, we monitored weights, we checked blood work, we did histopathology at conclusion for each individual. It took a lot of time, and there's a lot of documents, a lot of things to go through, and just different ways to organize the data. And it's somewhat time-consuming, and, since we're kind of donating time to do this, as bad as it sounds, I have a full-time job and a family, and I know Pat has a family and a full-time job, and we're getting things done as fast as we can with the, in quotes, extra time that we have.
Oh.
Right,
Well,
and I think another really important point to make is, it's one thing to come up with this very righteous idea of, hey, you know what, we're going to cure crypto today, guys. But the reality of it is you had to pick a drug, and you had to pick a drug that you hope worked. And then on top of that, you didn't have a dosage for the drug. You didn't know how many milligrams per kilogram that was going to work to effectively erase crypto. So you literally are starting with a dry erase board at zero, and you're hoping to pinpoint somewhere where it's going to be an effective dose, and you're really going from there. And as Mike just pointed out, you're doing PCR samples on every gecko every 2 weeks. So that's roughly it was 19 geckos. So you're talking 19 PCR samples that are running about $30 every 2 weeks. And you add that up over the course of the study, which roughly took a year and a half. In PCR samples alone, you guys can do the math on the calculators out there. And this is a small-time study with a relatively, funding, bank sitting there probably about 1% to 3% of what the big guys would have to spend. So if you look at what task was set in the table and what was done in that time period with, the funding and the resources we had, I think that's what really makes it such a monumental hurdle that was jumped. And another, good point with the publishing is these aren't, Joe Schmo on the corner, or somebody who has an opinion on the topic. These are the top professionals in the exotic medical field. This is the top level, and, these guys are looking it over with a fine-tooth comb. They're not going to put junk out in a very prestigious journal, and that is what takes time. It takes a lot of time to go back and forth, and that's exactly, what we're at now. We knew this part was going to take as long as the study took to do it, if not a little longer, because the process is so lengthy. And not only that, anybody who's written papers for journals knows it's a different kind of language. You really are speaking another language other than English. It has to be written correctly, and it has to be, worded in the way they want and situated in the paper the way that's needed. And then in that, you got to make sure all the information is obviously what they want. After all, the little hurdles are taken care of. So I just want to add a couple things in with that publishing process.
And Pat, you actually have a percentage rate of your success. So there is a light at the end of your enormously long tunnel, and what you've done is absolutely amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about the results that you two have seen?
We have, and I'm actually I'm a little surprised at the question that I've gotten the most in the last 2 years. Hasn't jumped up yet from our individuals following on the page, and that's, what drug do we use? I've been hounded about this question a lot, and now we can finally say we did use Pinazaril, also as marquee made by Bayer. And we did have an extremely good rate of, I'd say cure rate, because that, was proven by PCR and histopath. And this is basically what happened. after the animals were given and basically they ingested the oocytes of crypto, they were proven to be PCR positive by multiple PCRs. So we made sure the animal was definitely positive, and it wasn't just a transient bunch of oocytes running through the system at the time of the PCR. After we knew that the animals were in fact positive, we started the treatment protocol. And then we continued to recheck these PCRs until they came up negative. So that then gave us a time from when the animal was positive to how long the treatment protocol then took for the animal to show up PCR negative. When the animal was PCR negative, they were humanely euthanized, and then also, I may back up just a little bit, they had to be more than one PCR negative. The rule of thumb was 3 PCR negatives with a week apart with the protocol. So it wasn't, again, just that, okay, they're negative, all right, let's go check histopath. It was backed up by multiple PCRs that showed up negative, meaning, again, PCR is checking for the DNA of crypto organisms. So it's extremely specific and extremely accurate. So once the animals then were shown to be negative, we then sent it to the lab, Northwest Zoopath, which is the leading world's exotic histopath center. Basically, all the zoos send their samples there from multiple different species. Dr. Michael Garner is the top histopathologist there who reads the samples, and he would then examine microscopically the level of these intestines, and not only intestines, the kidneys, the lungs, the heart, basically every organ system to see, is crypto there? Is there evidence of crypto there? Was there inflammation there that showed that your crypto was once there? So we can tell the damage that this parasite has done in its time there. And then more importantly, did this drug destroy another organ system? And, you know, I'll let Mike get into a little bit more of that, but our cure rate was 80% plus. We had an extremely high cure rate with this protocol, so that's excellent news. I mean, you're not rarely ever going to get 100%. That would be like the end all, but, you know, that is an excellent, excellent number.
That is absolutely amazing. And so, I mean, it must feel really good to have such good success. Now, I'm curious, can these tests be done at home, or are the tests to look for the crypto something that has to be done in a laboratory?
The PCR tests, there's a few different ways to check for crypto. Some are very accurate, some are inaccurate. Basically, your extremely basic would be on a flotation. I have read thousands of fecal floats over the years. I can tell you it's not a very good way to look for crypto. And it's not that common anymore that labs or clinics do that. The next one, which I'm sure will ring a bell with many of you, is the acid fast test. It's a series of stains where it's stained with acid and other counter dyes to check for the oocysts. The problem with this stain is it's very dependent on the reader. It's not okay, this is, you know, it's positive, negative. You could get false negatives, which is a big problem. If the animal really does carry crypto, but it wasn't shedding it at the time that the sample was taken. So here you might be doing consecutive acid fast tests, spending a lot of money only to learn that your animal still has crypto and you wasted a whole lot of time. Which leads me to the next one, which I think is probably the best solution for not only breeders, especially breeders, but other people and clinics use these a lot, which is the PCR I've been talking so much about. Write this down, guys. Avian Biotech. This is the laboratory in Florida. Again, Avian Biotech, also called Animal Genetics. It's the same company. They will run these PCR samples for you. It's as simple as they will send you the kits, which is just a swab and a label so you can properly identify which animal you're sending in, and it goes back to them, and they actually do the PCR sample in their lab. It is pretty inexpensive. It's right around $30 plus the shipping, and, of course, that changes here and there, but still you have to call them for the correct pricing at the time. It's still not that expensive to do. Now, that test is extremely reliable. The only test which is probably just as, if not a little bit more reliable, was what Mike was talking about earlier with the electron microscopy. That's extremely expensive. You're talking $150 plus per test. So that's probably not a very economical route. So a lot of breeders say, well, how do we come up with a protocol? How do we really know, do our animals have it? And there's two different ways of doing it. You can either, let's say you have a small to medium-sized collection, you bite the bullet and you test them all. Now, again, we're not talking about a collection that has hundreds of geckos here, unless you have some kind of trust fund lying around that's gonna really help you out with that cost. So that's the gold standard, testing every single one of them. But again, I realize that's not economical in some of our situations. The other way of doing it is called a pooled sample, where you would do a pooled sample of the tubs or maybe rack systems, however you want to systematically do it, and you test it that way. So you're still testing a larger group of animals, and you're playing the odds game. And then, of course, no matter what, PCR sampling the animals that come in. I know a lot of us breeders, quarantine. It's what we preach, and that's what everybody preaches. But, I hear a lot, well, I got it from Joe Schmo. He's a really good friend of mine. I know he has extremely healthy animals, and I don't really worry about it. Well, that's great. He could be the best guy in the world, but the matter of the fact is his eyes aren't an electron microscope, and he can't see into the poop to see if there's crypto there. So the reality of it is quarantine is extremely important, no matter if you get it from a world-class breeder or Petco. Obviously, there's a big difference there, but still, it's very, very, very important. So testing, once again, animal genetics or avian biotech, they will run reptilian crypto samples for you. The name of the gentleman who heads the lab there is Arnie. He is a fantastic gentleman who will help out with anything, and he's more than willing to help out any breeders with any kind of systems or programs you want to do. So, again, those are different forms of testing, and I could go into a lot more depth. If anybody wants to know more, I could give a heck of a lot more details if you contact me.
Wow, that's amazing. I had a very interesting question. Now, normally when you have a crypto outbreak that spreads through your collection, it's pretty much, take your racks to the dump and you're done breeding. But do you guys see a spray cleaner to get rid of any residual crypto on your racks or tubs? Or what's
Excellent
the best
question.
way to clean? What would be the best way to clean that so that you can, have your collection euthanized and start again?
Well, let's pause for a second there. The whole idea of this study was so that we don't have to have the euthanasia of a collection. So I like that the question of what disinfectant do we use, but, I hope we don't have to, this is going to help give some kind of effective, solution to, hey, let's just euthanize everything. And not only that, there's a lot of horror stories in the 13 years I heard of people just saying, well, you know what, it's lose a little bit of weight, and I euthanized it without doing any kind of tests. And, with Mike being here, it's an excellent resource. I hope you guys use him tonight for your questions on, different medical advice. But, I think that there's not due diligence done enough in the reptile world as far as going out and really finding out what the problem is. So, I think you got to have a lot of evidence to back it up, first of all, before you get into, say, hey, we have a gigantic outbreak here. We got to get rid of everything. Outbreaks were pretty common in the late 90s and early 2001s with crypto, but lately you don't hear about it quite as much, and I think that's because trends are shifting and it is a little bit more hush-hush. So with that being said, my little tangent on that, I'll turn the rest of the question over to Mike about how to properly disinfect and what to use.
Yeah, so I guess the safe answer there is if you don't want to take any chances. I know rack systems are relatively expensive, but in the grand scheme of things, repopulating a collection and then finding out that you missed a tub is probably not worth the cost of just getting new racks. But, people talk about using quaternary ammonia products like Rocal and things like that. and I feel like they're probably effective, but you would need to take your rack systems completely apart so that you don't miss any little crevices or anything like that, and then you'd want to make sure that you do a thorough cleaning, and I would probably do more than one just because. And I guess if it was me and my own animals, if I was to the point where I was throwing my arms up in the air and saying start over, I would take the racks and I would burn them. But that's just me. I'd be like, this is totally not worth it. Forget this. Junk goes this plastic. Maybe I'd recycle. And then I would get new stuff. But I guess like for people at home, if you have a few geckos or you have, say, 2 geckos and you just want a good product to clean, in general I like chlorhexidine, but for crypto I think a quaternary ammonia compound would probably be better.
Okay, but not for sure just yet?
What was that?
Go ahead, Destiny.
I was wondering if steam is an option because, I've heard of the ammonia usage, but I was wondering about pressurized steam, microwaving, and sunshine because those are all supposed to be the killer of all tiny little things.
Yeah, so if you could UV sterilize it or autoclave it, that would be awesome. But most people don't have an autoclave, and UV sterilization will work if everything is exposed to the light.
Okay.
And I don't know that there's any studies to show exactly how long or what temps or any of that kind of stuff. So I know I'm being very vague here, but I don't think there's any guaranteed way to be safe about it.
And do you guys foresee at all that the work that you've done may be used in the future not only to treat those that are already infected, but possibly in a preventative capacity?
I think that would be possible if you obtain an animal that, or found out that one of your animals was positive and, you wanted to protect the rest of your collection, but, we're not talking about a really, really cheap drug that you can go out and, pick up at any pharmacy for $20. Like, the tubes are, one tube, it'll treat a lot of geckos, but per tube, my cost is around $100-something per tube. And normally they come in packs of 4, so actually it's a little more than 100. So it comes out to be between $600 and $1,000 per 4-pack, depending on where you get it from.
Yeah.
So theoretically, yeah, you could use it, and if you have 1,000 geckos and you're just worried, you could treat them. But I think that for people, unless if you have a huge collection of really valuable things, it might be a little bit cost prohibitive. That being said, a lot of veterinarians can compound it at lower concentrations, kind of dilute it out, which is what we do at the clinic. We have it there, but we dilute it out and use it, for a lot of different patients that come in. So, it's a lot more cost effective. Like my cost on Pinazero for a client that comes in is probably around $20-$30 for one gecko.
Yeah, that definitely seems a lot more cost effective. What do you guys, what did you see in the way of side effects from your treatments for the affected animals? Did they have any organ failures? Was there an increased desire for liquids? Did they have an aversion to food? Did you see any things like that would be considered side effects from the treatment?
I don't feel like we had any organ dysfunction because of it. And I'll let Pat talk about the whether or not they, increase water intake or decrease or change in appetite. I don't think there was, but I'll have him answer because he did more of the animal care part of this. Actually, he did all of it. I didn't do any of that. But because I'm in Wisconsin and he was in Pennsylvania. The that we used was, and because it's not published yet, I don't really want to come out and say the exact dose, but the dose was, we were dosing every other to every third day at a dose that was about 2 times what the near toxic dose for a mammal was, because there haven't been any studies to show what's safe in reptiles. So we figured that if we did it, that the total concentration would be near what the mammalian toxic dose would be. In mammals that were given really high doses, I think the study was done in horses, but don't quote me on that, there were problems with the reproductive tract, and I think primarily reproductive tract, but and then there was actually a study in mice too, and showed that there was a lethal concentration in 50% of them, so an LD50 of about half of the dose that we were using, but we were doing it every other day, and so it came out that the total dose was at about the LD50 for mammals. And so we went with a really high dose because we wanted to just see if it worked. And some of these guys, I have the results in front of me. Some of these guys were given 20, so the average was 27 treatments, but there was a standard deviation of 18, so I guess that would mean that there was some of them received 45 treatments. And none of the animals that we submitted for histopathology showed any kind of organ changes, like in the liver, kidneys, or any of that kind of stuff. So my hypothesis is that it's not as well absorbed in reptiles as it is in mammals, and maybe more of it stays in the GI tract, which is actually good because then it concentrates in the area where the cryptoorganisms are. That's what I'm hoping. But we didn't see any toxicity.
That is amazing, and I agree with you 100% on your theorem about how it's so much better for the animal for it to actually stay in the gut tract versus being passed or absorbed. So that's amazing information.
It would be great if we could do a pharmacokinetic study and see what blood levels are. That would be a little challenging, and I don't know exactly how to go about it. It would probably be fairly expensive as well, but I'm sure somebody will do it. It's just, maybe not for another 10 years. So it would be good if it was done sooner, but...
Well, what's expensive? What price range would you be talking about to do that?
Honestly, I don't even know. I could consult with people, but I don't know. I've never done that type of study before. You'd have to first be able to find a way to quantitate how much was in the. You'd have to develop some sort of assay to figure out how much was in the blood, like in the serum, and then you'd have to run all the samples, hourly or every 2-hour samples. It would be very, very difficult on a lizard the size of a leopard gecko. You'd probably want to be using like a monitor lizard or something that's, has a whole lot more blood to donate.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
so
people were also curious, did we do blood samples on these guys? And we did. We did chemistry samples periodically throughout to check the levels of creatinine and BUN, which are you're checking the liver. We're also checking the kidneys there. So we were able to draw blood, and I got pretty good at drawing blood out of leopard geckos. So, but as Mike said, they don't have a whole lot of it. So it's not like you can go and draw a couple mLs out of these guys. You'll just insanguinate them.
And mostly you're looking at, sorry for interrupting, mostly for looking at kidney function, we look at what the calcium-phosphorus ratio is and the uric acid level, and as kidney disease progresses, you start to see inverse calcium-phosphorus ratios. And then we looked at some of our liver values, like our ALT and LDH and stuff like that, just values that you would look at to evaluate whether or not we were causing harm, and nothing changed significantly throughout the course of the study.
That is really, really good information. So also, Pat, did you, while they were being treated, did you notice that the geckos had any behavioral changes? Like, were they more thirsty? Were they less hungry? Did you notice anything?
I think with working with the same animals so many times and just, working with leopard geckos so long, you kind of know when something isn't right, and none of the signs that we saw were pathognomonic that screams crypto. Nothing says, hey, I got crypto. But just taking care of them and some of the really subtle things that were going on, I could just tell that the PCR was going to come back positive. And a couple of those things were eye infections, where we had a good amount that came back positive that started to develop, goopy eyes and issues with shedding over the eye sockets, so we had to help them get the shed out of there. And also some of the other signs were, of course, diarrhea. And it just, not to be gross, but it definitely had a worse smell. I mean, yes, it's poop, but it just had a smell where there was something really wrong. Definitely also some anorexia. The animal's appetite definitely went down and correlated, actually, as they were getting better with the treatment, it picked up again. The animals really started eating. So you saw this roller coaster where the animal just hit. The crypto just hit, and it automatically, it didn't want to eat. The animals were kind of really non-social. And then as soon as the stool started coming out, it was extremely runny and in some cases discolored, and the eye issues. And then eventually, as the name persists, the pencil-tailed. They really started losing all their fat reserves back there because they weren't eating. But again, none of these signs, if I wasn't having my little cheat sheets of PCRs telling me if they were positive or negative, it could have been coccidia. It could have been another virus or some other parasitic, infection going on that screamed. So we didn't know, other than this is obviously a controlled study in that aspect. It didn't say, oh, yeah, we have crypto and without testing.
Wow. I'm floored. That is excellent information, and the shedding problem with the eyes, that's so good to know. I'm really glad that you guys did this, and I know it's been a lot of hard work, but I super appreciate it. Hey, Morgan, do we have any callers that are interested in asking questions that we haven't thought of yet?
We have one caller, but I'm not even sure who it is. So
let him
you guys, we'll just put them on. So caller from the 816. Caller from 816, you're on the air. Do you have any questions for Pat or Dr. Weniger?
Maybe they fell asleep.
Hello?
Hello, do you have any questions for Pat or Dr. Weniger?
I guess maybe they were just listening to the show.
I don't know where they are, so.
I think we bored them. They fell asleep.
They ran away.
Yeah, well, I
couldn't
even talk during this. I don't even know what to say. But I guess if anybody's listening and you want to call in, the number is 1-646-716-5403. And if you have any questions, then we will take your calls and we'll give you guys a few minutes. So
I have a question coming in from the chat room from Michelle. She was wondering that you have you've sent the study through to one publishing company or one journal. Are you planning on doing more, or are you just doing the one?
Probably at this time, you don't want to throw out a lot of eggs in different baskets because it's a little unprofessional. Say you went ahead and submitted a paper to 6 different journals. Yes, in theory, it increases your odds and lessens the time that it's going to go ahead and get published, but if you go ahead and get it published by one, you're kind of slapping the other 5 in the face. So it's a little bit, we went with one that is a great fit, and, it's going to really go into this specific journal excellent. So is there other journals or other different opportunities to be published? Oh, yeah, there's a lot of different journals, but you don't want to go ahead and throw it in every single one, throw a Hail Mary and say, let's go ahead. And, of course, then you got to go ahead with the revision process for every single one. And every single one's going to want something different. And, I'm sure Mike would be bald extremely quick if we went ahead and did every single one, because there'd be a lot of revisions. So at this point, we have committed to the one. Obviously, we're very far along in the process. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to go ahead and, restart and put in another one. In fact, it's the same question I had for Mike about 3 months ago about getting a little antsy myself with how long it was taking. But it is not really beneficial at the end of the day to go ahead and submit it to many of them.
Okay, I also have a few more questions coming from the chat room. I know for a fact that crypto is in, like Dr. Weniger said, many different species. I used to breed rabbits, and we would use corrid to treat it. And with them, it was way different than leopard geckos. It was much simpler to get rid of, and once it was gone, it was pretty okay. But are there other gecko species that are susceptible to crypto, like crested geckos or like the Mediterraneans or whatever, all the different types?
Fat tails do get hit with this strain of crypto pretty decently. But, and I'm sure with given the correct circumstances, the crypto could definitely infect more. But at this point, I think what we see in the hobby is obviously leopard geckos and definitely fat tails. My personal theory is there's a very high percentage of wild-caught fat tails that come in with it. Now, obviously, that's a whole other test to itself and research, but, there are other species, yes. Another very popular question that I've been receiving is, can animals pass this to humans? Can I get it from my leopard gecko? And the answer is no. The strain of crypto, there's Saurophilum, which means lizard-loving, and that is what is infecting these guys. And it's a total different mammalian strain. And kind of ironically, I have had crypto and spent some time in the hospital for it years ago, and it is not the same. It's not the same strain. I didn't get it from my leopard geckos. Mine actually originated from barnyard animals, totally different. And they could test that nowadays with PCR samples and all the technology. But that's another very popular question I get is, will my kids get this deadly disease by handling their pet leopard gecko? And the answer is absolutely not.
That's good information to know.
I've seen the crypto in other lizard species. I've seen it in fat tails and in leopard geckos, and actually a fair number of monitors I've seen it in. I'm sure there's different. I'm sure it's going to pop up in vast genera of lizards, and it kind of brings up an interesting point because you'll see some confusion as to what the subspecies is, if it's like Varinae or Saurophilum or which specific species it is. And the most recent information from the last ARAV conference in September was that it is the same crypto organism. So it used to be crypto Varinae, and then it went to, they switched it over and said Saurophilum, and now there are some studies to show that it was the same one. So it's technically going back to Varinae because it was originally found in Varinids, so in monitor species. But it's technically the same species. So
you had said that this is specifically fecal to oral contamination. So the only way that they can make each other sick is if one goes to the bathroom and the other one inadvertently gets it in its mouth somehow by licking around or grabbing a prey item that may have just like skittered through it or whatever, correct?
Kind of. we had a couple geckos that were actually infected, and I guess we don't know whether they had whether there's fecal oral contamination because they do lick around the environment. But I believe, and Pat, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was 2 geckos that were females that were exposed to a crypto-positive male, and when he was virtually asymptomatic, and when he bred those two females, they ended up positive. So I don't know if it's just transfonation, through breeding, whether he introduced them from his cloaca into theirs, or kind of how that went. So that might be a little more direct rather than fecal oral. I think there would need to be more studies to show that, but I think there was two. Am I right, Pat?
You are correct. We had two, because we were trying to go with the, being that this was a breeder's, kind of funded project. A lot of the questions were, can this be transferred to the egg or transferred via breeding? And what we found with what we were able to do is that breeding animals that were positive was difficult to get viable eggs out of, number one, and number two, to get them to hatch. Out of a handful of eggs, we had one hatch, and the baby did not live very long. But the females were actually, they contracted the crypto via the cloaca, which was extremely interesting, because that we weren't aware that it was able to occur. Now, whether the animal licked and cleaned the cloaca after, the intercourse, and that's where the oral ingestion came into play, that's possible also, but it's still an interesting theory that that's how it did occur, just simply by trying to breed the female with the male.
I had also heard that I'd heard two different things. So the only way to get rid of it is just to breed them all and then can the adults and then just raise up the young. And then others had said no, it can be born in the offspring. So what you were seeing is that the eggs were either inviable, didn't hatch, and then the one offspring actually expired fairly quickly. Did you guys get a chance to test that one?
No, and I think that the results from this mini study was nowhere near enough data to be conclusive of that. I mean, the theory is that the egg obviously comes out of the cloaca, the same slot, which all reproductive, and then, of course, urates, and the fecal matter comes out too, which includes the oocyst of crypto. So the theory was that, yes, the egg would come out, the crypto oocyst could be on the shell. Since it's extremely prevalent in nature and not a lot of things are going to kill it, the incubation of 80 to 90 degrees on the eggshell isn't really going to kill it. And since you're talking about a 30 to 65-day hatching of the gecko, roughly, yes, it's possible that the animal would come out of the egg, be exposed to the oocyst, and then bam, the cycle repeats itself. That's a whole nother study, which I think would be a great study to happen someday. But I don't think our results were enough. I think you needed more.
I agree. I definitely think that would be a worthy endeavor for later as well, because that's just one of the questions that I've always wondered. Does it go onto the egg? Does it not? But, I mean, it could be there on the shell. You're totally correct about that.
I mean, and as a breeder, how many animals, defecate within the hides? And, the oocysts then get contracted to the peat moss, vermiculite, whatever you're using, and thus the eggs are there too. So there's multiple ways that you can get crypto-oocysts onto the egg. So is it a viable theory? Sure. Is it one that's, worth doing a study about? Absolutely.
I agree. I think that I nominate you, Pat.
One day. Let's get past this one first.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that that's going to happen in the next couple months. So everybody knows.
No, I'll need a little bit of a breather.
I know that Dr. Weniger wasn't too excited about staying on the show for hours and hours, because where you guys are, it's actually pretty late. Where we are, Morgan and I, we're West Coast, so it's not nearly as late here. But I did want to ask Dr. Weniger, Pat had told me that you are a hobby breeder, so I wanted to find out a little bit about your own personal collection and what makes you tick. What do you like in reptiles?
So, I guess I'm kind of a weirdo in that I evidently don't get enough excitement at my day job. So I breed retics, and the only lizard I have right now is adult female crocodile monitor. I guess monitors and retics are kind of my thing. But in my life, I started having reptiles when I was about 4, and in my life I've had a vast majority of, not a majority of what's available, but majority of groups that are available.
I'll admit it, Mike, you're a closet Leo lover.
Pat, they are cool, and when you suckered me into getting some that one time, they were awesome. They just took way too much everyday interaction for me.
They don't eat rats, that's the problem.
Yeah, anything that eats bugs doesn't tend to offend as well with me. If I can feed it anything that's, bigger food that I can take out of a freezer, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Bugs are a little bit high maintenance. I find myself maintaining the bugs more often than I maintenance the Leos daily, though. So
yeah, that's what I should have said.
I do see the benefit of being able to just grab a prey item out of your freezer and toss it in and call it good.
Mhm.
So, what was it that got you guys really fired up about doing this? I mean, you said that you were doing it over a surgery with lots of coffee and donuts, but, I mean, it takes...
Donuts? Where were the donuts?
I don't know. Dunkin' Donuts was mentioned.
No donuts, just a lot of coffee.
I guess we should clarify, too, that, we weren't drinking the caffeine while I was doing whatever splenectomy or whatever I was doing.
It clearly takes a great deal of dedication to dive into a project like this. So what was it that just really piqued your interest that you thought, yes, we can do this, and I'm going to be the one to do it?
Well, we talked about this idea for a very long time, before that night where it was very early in the morning after a very long shift. So, we're going to do it. And it wasn't just we're really tired, hey, let's put this idea on the table. We talked about this for at least a year beforehand, where we're going to do it, how we're going to do it, how are we going to get the funding. There's just, before even any leopard geckos were even physically there, so many things had to happen. The research committee at the zoo has to pass it. The zoo has to think it's a good idea. It's a viable option. And then there's an IACOC committee, which also overlooks the humane treatment of the animals. You can't just go out and say, I'm going to do a research study and I'm going to do whatever I want. The animals have to be treated with the utmost respect. So there are a lot of different hurdles, and this was a long process to get to where we're sitting right now having this conversation. It's probably 3.5, 4 years in the making.
That's a really long time that you guys have been concentrating on this. And I for one, love leopard geckos. I love African fat tails. I mean, I have never personally had an encounter with crypto that I knew for a fact was crypto, but I've heard so many people be devastated by it, and I really appreciate, and I think that what you guys have done for the community, even with referring to it as just an opening of the door study to start, a bigger project and find out more later, I think that it was really a good idea. It was amazing, and your dedication has been phenomenal. And I know it wasn't an easy road. It was a rocky road, and you guys stuck it out, and you're still going strong. And I just really don't think that anybody can really understand all the work that went into it. So you guys coming on the show and explaining it all to us, even in just this little bit of time, I think will definitely help to give everybody a better idea of what was going on and why it was so important that it be done. So thank you so much for doing it.
Not a problem.
It was a good time.
It was fun.
Now it's not as good of a time, but it's still a good time.
Yeah, it'll be better once it's all published and we're all done. But
I liked the calls from Pat where we, number 13 came in negative. I'm like, oh, good.
Yay!
Then, I remember that morning. I was jumping up and down when the facts came in. I was like, you got to be kidding me. It actually worked. We got a negative PCR. It was, and then we were like, okay, let's calm down. Let's wait for another, see what happens next week. Test it again. It just came back negative and negative and negative, and that was where it just felt like you had a breakthrough. It was just a really, really good feeling, and all the work and the scrutinization. There was a lot of stuff that had to be overcome for this, so that made it all worth it.
Definitely, I think it was worth it. Of any endeavor that you could have picked, you picked the right one, both of you. And Dr. Weniger, I really appreciate you coming on Late Night Leos to discuss all of this with us. I know that Pat told me that you have a family, and yes, you have a full-time job, and you also have all of your hungry little retics to take care of and your crocodile monitor. So you donating your time to this show to help explain all of it to us was really amazing, and we just super appreciate it.
No problem. And, if people have questions, and if people, I guess, go and read the transcripts or something later and have questions like, what can I do, or, what do I look for, or whatever, I'm sure that, they can contact either Pat or myself, and we can try to help out, and hopefully we can kind of lessen how much crypto there is in the current population. It's kind of like one of my pet things, like crypto and geckos. We need to figure out. We need to also figure out like adenovirus and bearded dragons, and try to get past the perception that it's good that every one of them, every place has it, and just like arena viral infection in boas and pythons. Like there's so many infectious diseases in reptiles that need a whole lot more work. And I guess the whole hobbyists and breeders who put forth funds, and it kind of just opens your eyes and says, people actually do give a crap about this stuff. It's not just the random weirdo like Pat and myself that actually care. Like it's a lot of people that want to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, I like you random weirdos personally, so thank you. And did you want to maybe give any particular way that someone could contact you if they had further questions, like an email? Yeah,
if they go to the clinic I work at is called Spartan Animal Hospital, and it's in McFarland, Wisconsin. But if you go to the website link, you can click on Contact Us, and there will be a link to contact me at work, and I'll get I get all my emails that way, and it works out pretty well. That way, it kind of keeps it in a work type file, so it's not lost in my Hotmail account or something like that.
Gone into the trash folder forever. Oops.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Then people get mad and say, I emailed you about my whatever, and you never responded. I'm like, well, I only get 1,000 emails every couple days.
And you can also post any questions or, private message any questions on the Kill Crypto Facebook page. There is a Facebook page dedicated to it. And there's also killcrypto.com, a website, which quite honestly isn't really updated anymore. It's not used that much since social media has hit. We use Facebook a lot more. It's a lot easier to get a hold of people. That's monitored daily. So it's Kill Crypto at Facebook. We can answer anything you might have for us there. And one last thing I will say, we don't need any more geckos. We still actually have people on a weekly basis calling or emailing, trying to see if they would like to give geckos that might be effective crypto to study. And we do appreciate it, but we don't have any more geckos. We're past that, but it is nice to know people are following, and there's a big need for this.
Yeah, I have liked the Kill Crypto page, and I always get excited. I think it was maybe about 3 or 4 months ago when you guys announced that the paper was actually going for publishing and stuff like that. I was like, squee! So I really like that you guys have the Kill Crypto Facebook page. I really like following that a lot.
And we do post a lot of the updates on there, and there's not a whole bunch of updates because right now it's a slow period. It's kind of a back and forth with the paper, the journal, and it takes a lot of time. And I know a lot of times information that isn't shoved down onto a page or people's throats, they tend to think, well, you might be hiding something, or rumors or something start flurrying. But the reality of it is, I'm not just going to post something every day just so that there's something there. I want to have good quality information. And studies like this, if it was happening in the university lab, you wouldn't know nothing. The public would not know an inkling of what is even going on until the paper is actually given to a journal. And even then, good luck. You'd learn it many years later. So the reality of it is the information that we're making available way before the paper's even in a journal is unheard of. So it's not that we're keeping secrets. It's not that we don't want to tell anybody what the dosage or the protocol is. It's just we can't yet. It has to get into a paper to hold volume. So once that is done, I know me and Mike, we're willing to come back on again and kind of talk about any questions people might have about the full protocol. So please don't feel that we're trying to hide information at this point and not give certain stuff out. The reality of it is it is done. It's just waiting for publication. Nothing's being hidden from anybody. There are no big secrets. So it will come out, and again, we'll be available for questions anytime on the Facebook page, and of course, we're more than willing if you guys will have us back again to go over any questions the public or breeders might have at that point when they have the paper in their hands.
Oh, I am so excited to have you guys back when you're ready to tell us everything that we need to know, and we're excited to celebrate with you when this is finally, said and done for this portion, and we can move forward and follow you in your refining process. And then, of course, when Pat starts doing the whole breeding and gecko egg laying with crypto study that I've volunteered him for just now.
We need to start raising funds yesterday.
Yeah, hey Pat, how about this time if we're going to do a project like that, we make sure that we have all of the funds before we even start, just so there's no times where we're like, oh crap, we're getting low on funds.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, the testing is very expensive. It's extremely expensive, and not having a timeline, you're playing with the unknown. I mean, the study could be a month and it could be 10 years. So you really have no idea when you're dealing with living things and a living organism inside these living things, how long it's going to actually take.
So I know that we had got you guys for an hour, and we've had our time, and if you guys are wanting to stay on, we would love to pick your brains some more, but I know you both have families, and so if you need to go, you can definitely take this opportunity to bow out, as much as we'll miss you. But if you wanted to stay on and continue to chat, we have other things that we want to cover, and I'm sure we could come up with more questions for you guys, too.
Is there any more callers or maybe questions on the page we can answer quickly? I don't want anybody to feel like they didn't, have a chance to ask anything.
I do have a couple more questions here in the chat room. The question being asked is a 4-month quarantine for new geckos long enough? And another question, if they have been treated with your treatment, are they safe to enter the general population again, or to be with tub mates or to breed, or are they just cured and then isolated forever?
Those are excellent questions.
Yeah, I guess what people should probably know is that, we don't, when we treat an animal, like if I have a positive gecko come in, I don't routinely just start treating. I start treating with the protocol, but I don't, I don't send a PCR test out every 2 weeks, because it would, essentially people may need to refinance their house or something to pay for it. And contrary to popular belief, veterinarians aren't economically stupid. We realize that not everybody comes in driving a Maserati and wanting to spend $20,000 on their animal. So I guess what I would do in that situation is I would plan that, if this is a valuable animal that you want to treat it, or a loved pet that you want to care for, I guess I would recommend treating, but then following up until you get negative PCRs. You don't have to do it every 2 weeks, but maybe I would say our average time was about, was it like, I can tell you exactly because I have it in front of me, but it was about 90 days on an average of 90 to 100 days on average of once we started treatment before we started getting negative samples. So I guess in our clinic, I tell people that if their geckos are doing well, I recheck them at 90 days. Obviously, we can't send their intestinal tract in then to confirm that they're gone. So then what I would do is stop treatment and retest them, somewhere between like 1 and 3 months later, and make sure that they're still negative at that point before I would introduce them to any other animals. So it's a time commitment. Like, you don't just do a protocol for 3 months and then call it good. You really need to monitor because you don't want to take the chance of infecting all the rest of the guys.
Right. So what Mike's effectively saying is it's not a death sentence. It's a time sentence. I think that's very important. Some people put a 2-month quarantine, a 3-month quarantine, a 6-month quarantine. Running the quarantine at an AZA zoo, our protocols for reptiles and amphibians are 3 months. That is the minimum. So it could go above that, beyond that, depending on the situation and the tests being done. And it should be treated the same way in collections. So again, it's not that these animals, if it comes up positive, that, okay, it's a death sentence. The protocol could very well make this animal cleared, and it can live an extremely long, healthy, normal, reproductive life. If you're a breeder or a loved pet, a very long, healthy life. So again, it's a time commitment, like Mike said.
I think that I think from a quarantine perspective, in my mind, if I had a group of say like, okay, so I have my reticulated pythons. If I'm going to get one in and I'm going to quarantine it for 3 months, but even with zoos doing 3-month quarantines, there are zoos that have outbreaks of infectious disease. You read about them all the time in journals, and so for something like crypto, where the test is so cheap and relatively cheap and easy, I mean, you don't have to do anything except for send off poop. I would, if I'm going to get one and I'm worried about it, and I'm going to do it as part of my quarantine, I would just test new animals. Or at least like a combined, if say you buy 10 new animals from somebody, at least do like a bank sample on them just to give you an idea.
I think that is amazing advice.
Symptomatic. I mean, these geckos can go through a whole 3-month quarantine and not show any signs, and you put them into your general population thinking everything's fine. The reality of it isn't. And now, switch on the breeder business hat for a moment for myself, and here's the bottom line for breeders out there. There needs to be a pledge, and there needs to be a responsibility. And the responsibility is that you test the animal when it comes in. And it's not that expensive. You're talking $30. In the scheme of things, we've all seen $1,000 leopard geckos, $200 leopard geckos, $100 leopard geckos. But it's $30 for the leopard's life to know what's going on. So I think, as soon as the community, as far as breeders goes, gets this death sentence, we can't talk about crypto ID out of their head, and we really start doing stuff about it, that's when the change is going to come, and that's when you can better control this issue and stop having these, pictures popping up here and there and the PM saying this might be what's wrong with my gecko, we're not sure. It really has to be a pledge. I'm not saying 100% of people who keep leopard geckos out there breed them got to do this, but some of the people who are the more responsible, that a lot of people look up to us, we have to take kind of a stand in this and say, hey, look, we're going to start doing some kind of testing. We got to start somewhere. It's not a $400 test. It's a relatively cheap and easy test of putting poop on a Q-tip and sending it in the mail. We send geckos in the mail almost every day and go through a lot of shipping stress. To put a little Q-tip in an envelope and sending it down to Florida is minute compared to what life in the community could be one day for this deadly disease.
That's so true. I mean, you make it sound so incredibly easy that any breeder can just simply save everyone else a whole bunch of trouble and themselves by just doing one test for, say, their 10 animals that they just got from someone else, and just take your little community poop collection and send it off and test it. And just by doing that, you're just fixing it for everybody.
And this isn't an overnight thing. That's not what I'm sitting here saying that, 2014, this time we're going to eradicate crypto. That's not what I'm pledging here. I'm just saying people need to make a little bit more of an effort and start making a movement to be more conscious about it. And, we preach all the time, you get what you pay for. I've heard it from almost every single breeder in my 13 years, and there couldn't be a more truer statement. You get what you pay for. And
it is so true.
It is. And if you're going to a responsible breeder, you trust them, not just, genetics is always a hot topic, but putting genetics aside for a moment, you're trusting them to have a gecko that is healthy and is guaranteed to be free of these deadly pathogens. How could we say that when I would probably put extremely good money on 90% of breeders don't do a darn thing for surveillance?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, most people, I think, pretend it's not a problem. And then when it shows up and people start saying something about it, then they just wipe out the animals that they suspect have it and pretend like it was never a problem there. And, because of confidentiality laws, it's not like veterinarians go around saying, oh, this breeder has it in their collection and this breeder has it in their collection. And, we're strictly confidential with stuff. Like we'll never release where we got the geckos that, for our study. But, when it comes down to it, what did we do, Pat? We bought 19 geckos and 2 of them were positive. We didn't even have to search for the positive ones. Something like that. I think that was the number.
We thought we were going to search for a needle in a haystack, and it really wasn't. It wasn't that hard. And those geckos looked great. When they came in, they looked great. So it had nothing to do with, oh, wow, that gecko looks really bad. And, boy, it's a $20 gecko from whatever place, must have crypto because it's $20. But the reality was it looked phenomenal, and it came up positive. So it really just goes down to making a pledge and, people putting their money where their mouth is per se. And, I'm not going to say I'm an angel and I'm innocent in this. I got to do better surveillance all around too. I mean, we do some here with luxurious leopards, but I think as a whole, on a community, we could do better.
Well, and I think too, a lot goes for saying that it's an awareness issue too. At the beginning of the show, we had talked about other things that are all encompassed in this mysterious disease called pencil tail, which a lot of people they're just like, oh, it has pencil tail, freezer, end of story. So by coming on the show and talking about it, you guys are raising awareness and explaining a very simple way how we can be accountable and responsible for our own collections and the things that we send out into the world. And with this new awareness that we hope to give to everyone, maybe they will be a little bit more conscious that, oh, hey, you know what, maybe my kid isn't feeding the geckos. Maybe it's not that they're just sick. Maybe I don't have to stick them in the freezer. Let's just test them and see how that's going to go first, that kind of thing. So I guess they say that with human diseases all the time, awareness, awareness, awareness. I think that might be a new mantra for me to take on about the whole crypto situation. Awareness, awareness, awareness.
No, I agree. It's better to know and be educated, and not only that, not be afraid to ask the questions that need to be asked to anybody, whether it's the crypto team here or the breeder you purchased the animal from. It's always, these topics need to be talked about freely, because if they're not, this is what happens. And we kind of have, we have the elephant in the room that nobody has wanted to talk about for 10 years. But that's only done nothing but just let crypto just kind of go wherever the heck it wants.
As far as that goes, I think there's 2 things I wanted to say. One is, how about let's not wait until it's got a pencil tail. When it starts having diarrhea or regurgitation or anorexia, maybe consult a vet, or at least test it for crypto. You know, I see all the time people bring them in after they haven't eaten for a month, and their skin and bones, and an adult gecko is 25 grams, and you're like, holy crap, you know, this didn't happen overnight. Let's get them in a little sooner. And the other point is, you know, there's kind of this negativity that I think a lot of breeders feel towards veterinarians, and there are lots of vets who reptile vets who breed and keep reptiles, and that's their passion, that's their thing. And you know, instead of having kind of like, it's maybe not so bad, I don't know about the leopard gecko community so much, but I know with a lot of the like snakes and a lot of the monitor lizards, especially you go on forums and stuff, and you know, people are like, well, post your questions here, ask us about it, because vets don't know crap about reptiles. And that's a perception that needs to change, because there is a veterinary specialty for herpetologic medicine. It's constantly evolving. We get the newest information. There's studies coming out every single month in different journals, and you know, there's national conferences, and you know, I go to probably, I don't know, 40 or so hours worth of continuing education only on reptile diseases every year, besides reading the journals I get every month and that kind of stuff. You know, it doesn't have to be ask the breeder or ask the vet. It should be like everybody working as a team to figure out the problem, not, you know, kind of being against each other.
I definitely agree with that. I think that you are 100% right, and a lot of the time the community does regard the reptile vets or any vet, any exotic or specialty vet, with some sort of suspicion, simply because, I mean, it can go from a $50 visit to this $300 visit, like, in the blink of an eye, and a lot of times maybe people who are a hobby breeder or like just a collector or a pet keeper might not understand the reasonings for why that happens. So I think that it can be scary, but I really agree that with all of the advances that are happening with herpetological medicine, and even just our simple understanding of how reptiles are much more intelligent than were previously thought. I've read a couple of studies about some intelligence testing they were doing with reptiles, and I just think that with the whole entire reptile community and the hobby growing, there's going to be a bigger demand for reptile and exotic type vets, and I really do agree that everybody needs to work more closely together, and I think that it would just be better for the animals that way, not just the people.
You know, that's, I can't stress that enough. And if you, just one point that you made, you know, where you go in and it's, you know, I think our exam charge is $59. But if you come in for $59, I include a fecal flotation for free. I do an exam, get a history, and we formulate a plan. I formulate a plan with the owner. You will never come to our clinic and you know, come in expecting it to be $59 and go to check out and have it be $300. I think if you do that, if that happens, you need to find a new vet who's honest about cost. I tell people, this is how much crypto PCR costs. This is how much blood work costs. This is how much x-rays cost. We can take it step by step, or we can do it all at once. We formulate a plan, because the best way to get to an answer and to help the animal is to work together. If the vet just says, do this, I don't feel like it's going to get anywhere.
Okay, I just decided, Dr. Weniger, you are moving here to Arizona to live near me.
No, he's coming back to Pennsylvania now.
I guess we'll just have to chop him in half.
There are a few places in Arizona that there's a couple clinics that have very, very good reptile vets. I don't want to put plugs out for anybody, but I highly respect several of them. One of them actually just recently passed away, but which is, sad. But there are decent vets there. So I think you're in good hands. You just need to find them.
I'm going to be definitely looking. I definitely think that I'm going to have my on-call vet from now on. I was going to ask another question in regards to the whole elephant in the room, so to speak, with the whole crypto discussion. In the past, if somebody was to come out and say, oh my gosh, I have crypto, it was almost like you were, walking out there to sign your death warrant. You weren't going to be breeding or selling to anybody anymore because at the time there wasn't a cure. So everybody was just like, oh well, it was nice knowing you, Chuck. Later. Maybe you'll have more fun with ball pythons or something. So now that you guys are well on your way for having a cure, I think that we could probably see a change in that particular ideology of, oh, Chuck's done now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, at no point am I saying that if a breeder has, finds out they have a crypto infection that they should go on Facebook and, put it on their business page. I mean, I'm not saying that you should have secrets, but I'm saying we should as a community be able to freely talk about this. Every breeder has a niche of breeders, which they respect and they talk to, and they should feel free to ask any kind of questions. That's what I'm implying. They should be able to chat with these people who a lot of times are their mentors and, maybe have more experience with different matters. And that's what I mean. Like, I think there's even some pauses when it comes to talking to your really good friends about it. And the reality is you're not going to get anywhere. You're never going to learn anything if you're just, euthanizing these animals without knowing anything or not talking about it. It makes no sense. And, to touch upon the vet bills a little bit, there is a lot of times I see where, I went to the vet office and I had to spend $300 on blood work, fecals, and exam, and, I had to do this and this and that, and the reality is you need diagnostics. You can't figure out a problem without doing some testing. And I think in a lot of instances, some people should step back a little bit, take 30 seconds to go, hey, when was the last time I spent $300 on a reptile? Or a reptile equipment, or, what is this, what am I all paying? And the reality of it is, the majority of the time they're probably going to say, oh, yeah, I just bought a $300 leopard gecko last week. Especially with us medium-sized or large or small-time breeders or hobbyists getting into it, it's not uncommon to spend that on one leopard gecko. So how wrong is that of us to say that spending $300 for an office visit and diagnostic test to figure out a problem for a living creature isn't worth it? I hear the money argument too often. Well, this leopard geckos or this ball python or this reticulated python is only worth $150, so I'm not going to spend over that. Or I'm only going to spend half of that so I can still make profit. And I think, that's a lot of the big issue that we see is the money issue. We're not looking into these are live animals. And would you say that about your kid or a relative, that I can't spend that kind of money at the emergency room or the doctor's office just because? It doesn't make sense. I mean, to figure out a problem, you have to spend X amount of dollars, no matter where you're at. You had to spend the money to get the animal. You had to take responsibility for that life. So if you're not going to take responsibility of the care of the animal, then you have no business keeping any of these reptiles, no matter what it is.
I agree with that 100%. 100%. If you want to own or breed any animal, you are that animal's guardian, caregiver, and you are responsible for that animal 100%, no one else. And I think that with dogs and cats, people definitely have that particular thought process that, oh, they love me back, they cuddle with me. So if they get sick, they're going to run them to the vet. They're going to pay that $300 or $400 and not really worry about it too much, given that they're a decent human being. But with reptiles, I think that there might be a little bit of a different thought process, which I abhor
way different.
Completely.
It's a very different thought process. I've seen dog breeders drop, $2,000 on a C-section for a litter without blinking an eye. And reptiles, I've seen some owners come in and complain about a $10 fecal. There's many extremes. Now, don't get me wrong. There are reptile owners that will go to the moon for their animal.
Yep.
But I see more often than not, complaints on the social media of the costs of these testing. The reality of it is, it's really not that expensive if you think about it in the scheme of things.
Right.
And it's true, in social media, I do see people who will post a picture of a sick gecko. They say, oh, my gecko's sick, and then they'll get a little bit of advice. A couple days later, they'll come back and say, oh, it's still not better. And I'm just thinking, why don't you go to the vet? Just go. I have gotten in trouble with my spouse a couple of times for taking those expensive vet visits, but I had a gecko that had a prolapse and a hemipaine prolapse, and it was just horrible. He was suffering, so I took him in, and I really wanted to keep that animal intact for breeding purposes, so we did all of the things that we could do to try and save that particular hemipaine, the stitches, everything, and then we ended up having to surgically remove it anyway. But I mean, I was not afraid of having to spend the extra money to keep that animal happy, safe, and healthy. But I guess I can't expect everyone to be that way. So they're lizards, yes, but I dislike them as much as my dog or cat. So I just wish everybody was like that too.
So the bottom line is, if you can't afford the vet, you can't afford the pet. That's what it comes down to.
That's perfect, and it even rhymes.
Well, that's just an adage
a good one, Pat.
We use all the time. It's true.
That's a good one. I've had people with dogs and cats come in, and I say I want to run a test for Lyme disease because their dog's febrile and has is limping, and they ask how much it is, and I tell them, well, it's on we can test an antibody test with our heartworm test, and it's like $40-something, and they're like, wow, no way, just give me some meds. And then I have had reptile people come in and say, this is my problem, and they're like, I don't care what the cost is, just figure it out. And I do think that more and more people are getting to be like, more, I guess, at least open to the idea of looking into their reptiles' illnesses now than they were. I graduated in 2004 from vet school, and, in the last, 9 years, there's definitely been a change in how willing people are to care for these guys. It's just, it's still not where it needs to be.
I agree. I wish we could just whack everybody with a stick and magically fix them all.
There might be some assault charges with that.
That's okay. I'll take some jail time as long as people take their leopard geckos to the vets. Or, oh, my monitor's toe fell off. I don't really know what happened, but I put a little Neosporin on there, the kind with the pain reliever in it. And he was licking it, but I think he'll be fine. I'm like, ugh.
I had that last week. Actually, it was 2 toes fell off and the foot swollen 4 times as big as it normally is. Do you think that it's a problem? I'm like, oh my God, you have to change everything.
I put some Neosporin on it. It should be fine, right?
Do we any more questions from the page or callers? Just want to make sure while we're chatting.
Questions on the page.
There's no more callers. Do we want to let the vet get to bed and maybe pick Pat's brain a little bit about his projects?
Yes, I think that would be fun. I would love to talk to Pat about luxurious leopards.
All right.
Okay,
sounds like a plan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much
You're
for all the work that you've done for the gecko community, and there's no way we can pay you back for it.
I want to. You're very welcome, and I enjoyed it. I want to make one shameless plug here. So our some representatives are trying to add reticulated pythons and boa constrictors to the Lacey Act, And then next will be some of the other smaller pythons, and then will be other pythons and other boas, and then will be smaller lizards, and it'll go down, and eventually no reptiles will be allowed because they'll be considered threats for it being invasive species. So if everybody listening or who accesses this could contact their state representatives and tell them that it's a terrible idea to destroy our, reptile industry, that would be great.
Yes,
definitely.
I agree with that.
And thank you guys for having me on, and if you ever need anything, just call.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward to having you back again, so we will definitely be bugging you to come back again.
Sounds good. You guys take care.
You too.
Have a good night.
You too.
All right. Good night, Pat. Bye.
Good night.
Okay. So, Pat, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your projects for this next season?
We have tons of projects for this next season. Of course, every year, one of the reasons I love leopard geckos is not just because of their personality and, everything about them. It's the genetics. I love the genetic part at heart, and every year I have to add new projects and plug in new mixes just to make the scientific part of my brain excited and seeing what's going on. So some of the things that projects I'm excited about in this year and next season are some of the subspecies. They're really starting to pick up as far as popularity out in the market. We currently have Fasciolatus, Afghanicus, regular wild-type Macularis, the ever-popular Agramanu, and Turkmenicus. So we do have a fair amount of subspecies that we do have groups that we have imported from a clean population over in Europe, and of course a couple breeders here that are trusted in the States we keep them just pure, and that means no hets. And I guess I should be a little careful with the word pure. I think we throw it around way too much in the leopard gecko hobby. I should say the animals, there's no hets in the animals, no hidden surprises. They look the way they should look coming from the location where they're originally from. So some species I'm a little excited about. We do, of course, we're going to keep plugging away with the bright bells, which unfortunately Paul Allen from Bright Albino is no longer in the hobby, but I did work with Paul for many years on many different projects, and two of which I had the pleasure of getting from him are bright bells, which are known for their color on the bell albino, and of course the lavender bells. We work with both lines of those guys and have since plugged them into radars and gem snow radars, and next year we'll be working on plugging that into white and yellow, so adding another gene. And that's kind of the as a leopard gecko community, I think we kind of at this point have a lack of brand new morphs. It's been a little bit, white and yellow was really the last morph to hit the United States, but the reality of it is it's not a new morph. It's been around for quite a long time. It just has hit the States in the recent years. But the reality of it is we haven't seen an explosion of new morphs, whether recessive dominant or co-dominant. So, at this point, breeders, I think, are getting very creative and trying different crosses, and line breeding, I think, has now become a huge part of what you're seeing from a lot of breeders. And, I think that's actually a great idea, because line breeding, no matter what, always, if done correctly, keeps you one step ahead of the competition in those projects, because you're holding back the better for the next season and selling the medium to good grade, which, in most cases are actually pretty nice, but you're hiding the exceptional back for the next year. So I think you're seeing a lot of trending towards line breeding in the market. Of course, there's a lot of white and yellow combos yet to be seen here. I think we will see a lot more in the next season now that white and yellows are becoming more widespread out there. You're seeing a lot of bell albino white and yellows have become extremely popular in the last year. So those are a few of the projects I'm very excited about. And of course, our Inferno stripes are going to keep plugging away on them, and we'll actually start releasing more of them this year.
Wow.
So,
That's a lot of projects.
Yeah, that was a
that's
lot to be
honestly
excited
probably about 10%.
Yeah.
We do, on average, about 600 to 700 offspring a year. It sounds like a lot. We do year-round breeding. So, for instance, we already probably have about 40 eggs in the incubator, and we just pulled our last egg out from the last season. I believe it was mid-September. So there was a mini break. That spanned over a very long time. And I know there's breeders that, medium-sized, large breeders breed way more than that. And I'm not talking about the big, gigantic producers. The Ron Tremp, who obviously produces a lot, and Gourmet Rodent and the Bells.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, I just have to say that on a personal level here, I adore quite a few of your projects because purple happens to be my favorite color. And I've often wondered, if purple might be your favorite color too, because so many of your projects have the most gorgeous color of lavender in it. And I know you really like your fascios, which tend to be super purpley too. So tell me a little bit about how you got so much lavender in all of your projects, because it's a struggle for me.
It was actually, and it's not my favorite color, actually, by far. One of my favorite morphs is the just simple super hypo caratail. A nice bright orange, clean, baldy kind of lights my fire. I like the original stuff. Even I'll throw a plug out here for Marsha McGinnis from Golden Geckos. I love her patternless. The original patternless stuff, a little bit of caratail. I think some of that stuff's really cool. But with the lavender stuff, it's really, I can't take all the credit for that. Like I said, with Paul, a lot of that was done, previously when I got the project 4 years ago. He did the legwork, and we just kept going with it with the lavender bells. And the fascios, the fascios are just, they're by nature, they're a little bit lavender in the banding. And you don't line breed them. You don't try to line breed them, but just, the breeder in us, I guess, picks out the nicest looking animal from year to year, and you mistakenly start line breeding things in these subspecies which you really didn't mean to do, but you can't help to do because you like a certain look. Just like you see very yellow Afghans and you see very dark Afghans, it has to do with the different lines and where they came from. It doesn't make one animal less of a quality than the other animal. It's a different look.
Yeah, I really like the look of purple, so you keep that up. And so tell us, we want to know all about what makes Pat tick. I know that you are the creator of the Gecko Breeders Corner on Facebook, which is a group for people who are breeding geckos, but we also have quite a few enthusiasts in there too. So tell us a little bit about what made you decide to start such an epic group. What were you thinking?
Well, to put it short and simple, without getting into the red tape and politics of it, I really just wanted a group where people can go share pictures, share information, talk about hot topics, and, kind of feel free of doing that. And, I'll tell you, quite honestly, here on the record, obviously, when you get 800 plus people in the room, well, not even 800, you get 200 plus people in the room, that's a lot of opinions, and it's a lot of stances, and there's a lot of takes on different topics, and there's people coming from all different sides, and there's going to be disagreements, there's going to be little spats, maybe sometimes things that heat up into arguments, and I don't think it makes one person worse than the other. I don't think it makes one person right. It doesn't make one person wrong. I mean, there are some obviously stances where, and certain things that are just clearly wrong, like mixing albinos. But I think it's certainly healthy as a community to chat about some stuff and have a disagreement. We're individuals, we're people, and there's not always a right and wrong answer. And I think sometimes people misconstrue these topics and these discussions as drama. We love to use that word a lot in this community, is drama. But it's not always drama. Sometimes these are things where people just need to be a little bit more patient with the other individual and really find out what What is making them think that way? Like I said, it doesn't make one person wrong. It doesn't make one person right. It doesn't make one group better than the other, because one group has more topics that seem to cause more heated discussions. I mean, maybe that group's better than the other group because there's a little bit more drama, because they're talking about stuff that's meaningful. And that's the bottom line. I don't think there's one group out there on Facebook, any of social media, that is totally without any drama and a so-called safe haven. It's not going to happen. We have a lot of opinions. We are very passionate people about what we care for and what we believe in. And with the passion is going to come disagreements. And we as adults have to understand how to deal with that, how to be professional about that, and how not to just plain act like a kid. You have to learn when, you're not agreeing with this person, you got to walk away. You got to not start an argument. You got to not act like you're 12, and just handle things professionally. I think we need to bring old school professionalism back to the hobby.
Yeah, I definitely
agree with that.
I mean, we were arguing on these pages, no matter if it's the corner or, the blog or any of them. There's 20, 30, 40 of them. You can sit and search all night. The people that are coming in and trying to learn from us. And, whether maybe we don't like another breeder. I don't like how somebody does something. They don't like how I do something. You know what? That's not for me to bring up there. I have their number. If not, I can find it. I have their email. There's ways of contacting everybody. There's just some things that should be discussed on a telephone or email or maybe in person at a show or something. We don't need to look petty in some circumstances in the public. These places are to show off, to enjoy these animals, and for people to come in and have great discussions and actually learn. Because as breeders, it's a big circle. We rely on new people coming in and enjoying this, and they have to learn from us. And if we do not have an atmosphere where they feel they could do so, then we really have no business opening a page, and running a page, because we're just not doing our jobs anymore. It's all stopped. And not only that, if a community can't come together, as Mike talked about earlier with the plug about these new legislations going through, banning this and banning that, how do we look to the people who don't know anything about reptiles, really? We don't look very good. If all we're going to do is argue and bicker about certain things, about things that are honestly not trivial. There's a lot of people who have families that and other things that they want to do in life, and this is a passion. They want to come and they want to enjoy it. And that's what it should be. It should be going in and enjoying what we do. I know we're not millionaires. There's not a whole lot of millionaire leopard gecko breeders out there. So we should
speak for yourself. No, just kidding.
Well, I mean, maybe you're a millionaire, but I'm not a millionaire. So, in fact, the reality of it is we do what we do because we love it. That's the reality of the situation. And we got to have fun with it. That's what it comes down to.
I really think that hits the nail right on the head. The only reason why I clean poop like twice a week from all my zillions of racks is because I like leopard geckos. And when people get petty, small, or make personal attacks for no reason, it makes it not fun. And it really stinks to see friends involved in things that, it seems to, cheapen the experience. I don't know. I just really like leopard geckos, and from that, I've learned that I have a great love of photography. So it really fulfills two hobbies for me in one. And I know everybody likes to take pictures of their stuff and show it off, and I really like having the corner to go to share my pictures and get feedback and say, oh, yeah, that's a good gecko, or, oh, I don't know, what happened to that one? Now, maybe that one can go back in the egg for a little bit. I don't know. But I really appreciate the fact that you do have a great group to go to. Everyone's always been fairly knowledgeable, fairly willing to give up secrets and all sorts of fun things we've talked about, where to get all the great tubs for chief and hides. And, everybody's willing to share that information. And I really like it there, and I think that other people should give it a chance too and check out Pat's group, the Gecko Breeders Corner. I don't think that anybody would be disappointed.
Yeah, and not just giving information, but friendships too. That's something that the Gecko Breeder Corner. It's all about community, and I really enjoy that a lot about your group, Pat.
Yeah, it is a really great tight-knit community with a lot of great breeders there, and the important thing to remember is none of us are angels. We've all made a mistake. We've all done things that we wish we could set that clock back a little bit. We've said things to an individual or maybe in the public that we didn't want to say. And in the heat of the moment, we said it. And, and I'm guilty of this also. I'm not sitting here on a soapbox saying I'm perfect, because I'm not. But I think if we all, again, took a little commitment to take 45 seconds and say, really, how serious is this at this moment? How deep do I have to get in this argument? And just back off. Just walk away. It's a computer. Turn it off. Close the laptop. Walk away. Come back later. It's that simple.
Turn off your notifications on your phone.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything would be a lot smoother if we, just did stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, do you want to tell everybody your website, your page, all of that?
Yeah, the website is luxuriousleopards.com. We also run dartfrogdepot.co. I do a lot of work with poison dart frogs, so you'll find all the species we work with there with a full line of supplies and supplements for those guys as well. And also, of course, the Luxurious Leopards Facebook page. We have a YouTube channel, which I'm not as good as I used to be putting up videos, but I will try to be better. And also, of course, the Gecko Breeders Corner, where it is by you request to get on in, but we have a great group of admins which are monitoring it almost 24/7.
Right on. That is awesome. Yeah, I didn't know you did the whole dart frog thing until recently.
Oh
my
frogs,
gosh.
Pictus geckos, day geckos, gargoyle geckos, crested geckos. I have a lot of other stuff that I like to play around with.
I saw a photograph of an awesome, miniature ecosystem in giant form that Pat created for his little dart frogs, and it was, I wish I was an inch big and could live in it. It was so awesome and colorful and soft-looking with moss, and I think, Pat, you may have missed your calling as, the interior decorator of the rainforest.
It is really fun. That's one of the most interesting jobs I like to do is customize tanks for people. I just finished a very, very large project, 8 foot tall by 8 foot long by 3 foot deep ecosystem for a customer, and it was just amazing. But that's cool to really do stuff like that.
It was so colorful. I just seriously wished I was 1 inch big and could live in there.
It was fun. We actually just released all her dart frogs about 2 hours before the show, and it was amazing when you get to see animals and what you build. It's really fun. So we do a lot more than leopard geckos. Of course, leopard geckos are my first love. We've been doing that. When we just started our 14th season, so they're my passion. But we do some other things.
That is awesome.
Thank you for. We've got a minute left, so I guess we will shut it down. Thank you so much for coming.
Fun, guys.
Yeah, and all your work with Kill Crypto and all of that, the community owes you, and they can never repay you for that because, I don't know anybody else that's trying to do that. So thank you so much.
Not a problem. It was fun, and we'll come back again. Whenever you want us to come back, we'll be more than happy to come back to the show.
Yeah, maybe we could do a couple shows, like a Dart Frog show and a Black Pearl show, just separate.
We could do a whole show on pearls.
Yeah, where you got it and all that. So thank you so much for coming on, and I guess we will talk to everyone next Saturday.
All right, sounds great. Thanks again, guys. You guys have a good weekend.
You too. Thanks so much, Pat.
All right, good night.
Bye.
And so, Morgan?
Yes.
Did you want to give everybody a little teaser of what next week's show is going to be?
It's a surprise.
Yay for surprises. Okay, well, we'll see everybody next Saturday right here.
Yes.
Same Gecko time, same Gecko place.
Yes, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you, and I'll talk to you later, Destiny.
Bye, Morgan.
Bye.